You're at dinner with friends, laughing at jokes, contributing to conversations, being the version of yourself they know. Friendly, appropriate, easy to be around. Then you go home, close the door, and become someone completely different. Quieter, darker, more honest. The version nobody sees. You have entire thoughts you've never spoken out loud, entire parts of your personality you've never shown anyone, entire pieces of who you are that live only in your head, because the gap between who you are and who you show has become so vast you can't even see across it anymore. You're not just hiding your real self, you're living two separate lives, one on the surface for everyone to see, one beneath the skin that nobody knows exists. You've become beneath skin. Let me tell you about David. David is 34, software engineer, has a girlfriend, close group of friends, good relationship with his family. If you asked anyone in David's life to describe him, they'd say he's logical, calm, emotionally stable, easygoing. David never complains, never causes drama, never shows strong emotions. David seems fine, but 6 weeks ago David was alone in his apartment and started crying for no reason he could identify. Not sad crying, not grief crying, just crying because something inside him that had been compressed for years finally cracked. And as he sat there, he realized something terrifying. Nobody in his life knows him. Not really. They know the version he shows them. Logical, calm, stable. But the real David? The one who feels everything intensely but learned to hide it. The one who has entire philosophical thoughts he's never shared. The one who's weird and dark and complicated in ways he's trained himself to suppress. That David lives entirely beneath the skin, invisible to everyone, including himself most of the time. David has become beneath skin. He's not wearing a mask exactly. He's living two lives simultaneously. The surface life everyone sees and participates in, and the real life that exists entirely internal, entirely hidden, entirely unknown. And the gap between these two versions has become so normalized, he forgot it wasn't supposed to be this way. Forgot that other people might actually show who they really are. Forgot that the person you present to the world is supposed to have some connection to the person you actually are. And if you're watching this, if you know exactly what that gap feels like, if you've been living beneath your own skin for so long, you've forgotten what it feels like to be seen. You need to understand something. The gap is killing you. Not dramatically, not obviously, but slowly, quietly. The exhaustion of maintaining two separate selves is consuming you from the inside out. Beneath skin is what happens when the gap between your authentic self and your presented self becomes so wide that you're essentially living as two different people. The public version everyone knows, and the private version that exists only in your head. It's not performance, not exactly, because you're not trying to deceive anyone. It's survival. You learned early that showing who you really are was dangerous, uncomfortable, caused problems, made people react in ways you couldn't handle. So you created a version of yourself for public consumption, appropriate, acceptable, easy, and kept the real you hidden beneath the surface where it's safe, but also suffocating, isolated, unknown. Think of an iceberg. The part above water is what everyone sees, maybe 10% of the total mass. The 90% beneath the surface is invisible, submerged, existing but unknown. That's you. The person people think they know is just the tip, just the surface presentation. Beneath that is the real you. The thoughts you never share, the feelings you never express, the personality traits you've learned to hide. The authentic self you've buried so deep you sometimes forget it exists. And living this way feels normal because you've been doing it so long. But it's not normal. It's exhausting, it's isolating. It's a form of self-erasure so complete that you've forgotten what it feels like to exist as one coherent person instead of two separate selves. You've become beneath skin, someone whose real identity lives entirely internal, entirely hidden, entirely beneath the surface they present to the world. You're not split personality, you're not dissociative identity. You're something more common and more subtle. You're a person who learned that authenticity was dangerous, so you created a safe version for public consumption and locked the real version away. Somewhere nobody can hurt it, nobody can judge it, nobody can reject it. But nobody can know it either. Nobody can love it. nobody can see it. And you're so lonely for being known, for being seen, for being understood as who you actually are, instead of who you pretend to be. But the gap has become so wide and so normalized that bridging it feels impossible. Psychologists might call this compartmentalization, self-concealment, or authentic self-suppression. But beneath skin is more specific than that. It's the particular suffering of living as two separate people, one visible and acceptable, one invisible and real, and slowly realizing that nobody knows you not because they don't care, but because you've never shown them who you actually are. The person beneath your skin is a stranger to everyone, including yourself. How do you know if you've become beneath skin? Let me show you the signs. Sign 1. You have entire parts of your personality that nobody knows about. You're funny in your head, but serious in public. You're deeply philosophical internally, but keep conversations surface level. You're weird and dark and complicated in ways you've never let anyone see. If someone asked you to describe yourself, you'd describe the public version, not the real one, because the real one has been hidden so long you've almost forgotten it exists. Sign 2. You edit yourself constantly before speaking. Every thought goes through a filter before it comes out of your mouth. Is this appropriate? Will this make them uncomfortable? Does this fit the version of me they know? By the time something reaches your lips, it's been sanitized, simplified, made acceptable. Your real thoughts stay in your head, where they can't cause problems, can't make people react, can't reveal who you actually are. Sign 3. You feel most yourself when you're completely alone. When nobody's watching, when there's no one to perform for, when you can finally drop the public version and exist as whoever is left underneath. You have thoughts and behaviors and preferences that only exist in private, because showing them publicly would reveal the gap, would expose that you're not who people think you are, would risk the social acceptance you've built by hiding your real self. Sign 4. Nobody asks you deep questions anymore. People have learned you give surface answers, keep things light, redirect conversations away from real topics, so they stop trying. They stopped asking how you really are, what you really think, who you really are, because they've learned you'll just give them the public version, the appropriate response, the easy answer that maintains the surface and protects what's beneath. Sign 5. You feel like a fraud in your closest relationships. Your partner thinks they know you, but they know the version you show them, not the version that exists in your head. Your best friends have entire misconceptions about who you are, because you've never corrected them, never shown them the real you, never bridged the gap between public and private. So you're surrounded by people who love you, but you feel completely alone because they love the surface version, not the person beneath the skin. Sign 6. You're exhausted from maintaining two separate selves. Living as two different people is cognitively draining. You have to remember what the public version would say, how they'd react, what they'd feel, and constantly suppress the real version that's different, that's complicated, that's not acceptable. The gap requires constant management, constant energy, constant vigilance, and you're tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix because the exhaustion is existential. Sign 7. You've started forgetting who the real you even is. You've been suppressing the authentic self for so long, showing only the public version, that when you're alone and try to access who you really are, there's confusion. What do you actually think? What do you genuinely feel? Who are you without the performance, without the filter, without the gap? And you're not sure anymore because the real you has been buried so deep for so long, it's become almost unreachable. Sign 8. You panic when someone gets close to seeing the real you. When a conversation goes deeper than usual, when someone asks a question that would require real honesty, when there's a moment where the gap might be revealed, you panic. Not external panic, internal panic. The fear that they'll see beneath the surface, see the gap, see that you're not who they think you are, and reject you for it. So you redirect, deflect, go back to surface level where it's safe, where the gap remains hidden, where nobody gets close enough to see what's beneath your skin. If you recognized yourself in 5 or more of these signs, you need to understand that the gap isn't protecting you anymore. It's isolating you, it's exhausting you, it's preventing anyone from actually knowing who you are. And that's not safety. That's loneliness pretending to be protection. So why do we become beneath skin? Why do we create such a vast gap between who we are and who we show? The answer is learned suppression combined with social conditioning. At some point in your development, you expressed your authentic self, and something bad happened. Maybe people laughed, maybe you were punished, maybe you were made to feel weird, wrong, too much, too intense, inappropriate. Whatever happened, you learned that authenticity was dangerous and hiding was safe. So you created a public version, the you that's acceptable, appropriate, easy to be around. And you suppressed the real version, the you that's complicated, intense, weird, real. Over time, this became automatic. You didn't consciously decide to hide yourself. You just learned that showing certain parts got negative reactions, while hiding them got positive reactions. So like any intelligent organism optimizing for survival, you kept doing what worked. You kept the real you beneath the skin where it couldn't be hurt, couldn't be judged, couldn't be rejected. But here's what nobody tells you about this strategy. It works too well. Yes, hiding your real self protects you from judgment and rejection, but it also prevents connection, prevents intimacy, prevents anyone from actually knowing who you are. You've optimized for safety at the cost of being known. You've protected yourself from rejection at the cost of genuine connection. You've kept yourself safe at the cost of being seen. And our society reinforces this. We're taught to be appropriate, professional, socially acceptable. We're taught that certain thoughts shouldn't be shared, certain feelings shouldn't be expressed, certain parts of ourselves should remain private. We're taught that authenticity is oversharing, that showing your real self is attention-seeking, that keeping things surface level is maturity. So the gap between authentic and presented becomes normalized, expected, praised even. People call you well-adjusted, mature, professional, when really you're just very good at hiding who you actually are. The gap develops so gradually, you don't notice it widening. First you hide the weird thoughts, then you suppress the strong feelings, then you perform the acceptable personality, then you forget what's authentic versus what's performance. Then you wake up one day and realize you're living as two completely separate people, and nobody, including yourself, knows which one is real anymore. Beneath skin didn't happen all at once. It happened degree by degree, suppression by suppression, hidden truth by hidden truth, until the gap became so wide that bridging it feels impossible. Let me tell you what beneath skin costs you. It costs you connection. Real connection requires being known. Not just your surface behaviors, but your actual thoughts, your real feelings, your authentic self. But you've hidden that person so completely that nobody knows they exist. So all your relationships are with the public version, the surface presentation, the person you show. And that person isn't fake, exactly, but they're incomplete, partial, a fragment of who you actually are. So you're surrounded by people who think they know you, but they don't, not really. And you feel lonely in rooms full of friends because connection without being known isn't actually connection. It costs you intimacy. Intimacy is mutual knowing, mutual vulnerability, mutual truth. But you can't be intimate while maintaining a gap this vast between who you are and who you show. Your partner knows parts of you, but not the parts you keep hidden. Your friends know surface you, but not underneath you. Nobody gets access to the real person beneath the skin, because you've learned to keep them out, keep them at surface level, keep them from getting close enough to see the gap. So you're in relationships without real intimacy, surrounded by people without being truly known. It costs you authenticity. You've been suppressing yourself for so long you've started to lose access to your authentic self. When you're alone and try to just be, there's confusion. What do you actually like versus what you perform liking? What do you genuinely feel versus what you've trained yourself to display? Who are you without the filter, without the gap, without the constant management of two separate selves? And you're not sure anymore because authenticity has been buried so deep for so long that accessing it feels foreign, uncomfortable, almost impossible. It costs you energy. Maintaining two separate selves is exhausting. You're constantly monitoring what you say, filtering what you show, managing the gap between authentic and presented. Every social interaction requires this management, this filtering, this performance of the public version while suppressing the real version. And it drains you in a way that's hard to explain to people who don't do it, in a way that makes you need hours alone after social events. Not because you're introverted, but because you've been managing the gap and it's exhausting, and you need time to stop performing, stop filtering, stop maintaining two separate selves. And underneath all of this is the fear that terrifies you most. What if you showed them who you really are and they didn't like that person? What if the real you isn't acceptable, isn't lovable, isn't someone people want to be around? What if the gap exists for a reason? What if you're hiding yourself? Because yourself isn't good enough, isn't right enough, isn't something anyone would choose if they saw it clearly. That fear keeps you beneath your skin, keeps the gap wide, keeps you hidden even though hiding is killing you. Because at least hidden you can maintain the illusion that if people knew the real you, they'd still accept you. Show them and find out they don't. That's the risk you can't take. So you stay beneath your skin, unknown, unseen, unloved, for who you actually are. So how do you stop being beneath skin? How do you close the gap between who you are and who you show? First, understand this. You can't close the gap overnight. You've been widening it for years, maybe decades. Closing it will be gradual, terrifying, and absolutely necessary if you want to be actually known by anyone, including yourself. Here's where you start. Step 1. Acknowledge the gap exists. Stop pretending you're the same person privately and publicly. Admit to yourself that there's a version you show and a version you hide. Name it, recognize it, stop treating it as normal or acceptable. The gap is real, it's wide, and it's preventing anyone from knowing who you actually are. Acknowledging this is painful, but it's the first step toward doing something about it. Step 2. Start with micro-authenticity in low-stakes situations. You can't suddenly reveal your entire hidden self to your closest people. The risk feels too high. Start small. With a stranger, with a cashier, with someone you'll never see again. Share one slightly more authentic thought. Express one slightly more real opinion. Let one small piece of beneath the skin you be visible. These micro-experiments build evidence that authenticity is survivable, that people can handle slightly more real you without rejecting you. Step 3. Stop filtering everything before it comes out of your mouth. This is hard because filtering has become automatic, but try this. In low-stakes conversations, share thoughts with 20% less filtering. Not complete raw honesty, but slightly less edited than usual. See what happens. Usually nothing bad. Usually people respond fine. Usually the rejection you fear doesn't materialize. And each time you filter less and survive, you build evidence that the gap doesn't need to be this wide. Step 4. Tell one person about the gap. Choose someone safe, someone who's earned it, and say this: I need you to know that the version of me you see isn't complete. There are parts of who I am that I've never shown you, thoughts I've never shared, aspects of my personality I've kept hidden. I'm not sure how to close that gap, but I need you to know it exists. This is terrifying because it reveals the performance, exposes the gap, admits that you're not who they think you are. But it's also the beginning of being actually known. Step 5. Practice alone authenticity first. Before you can show others who you really are, you need to reconnect with that person yourself. Spend time alone doing things the real you likes, thinking thoughts the real you thinks. Being the person who exists beneath the skin without any audience to perform for. Journal without filtering. Talk to yourself without editing. Let the beneath skin version exist fully when you're alone, so you remember what that person is like, what they think, who they are when the gap isn't being maintained. Step 6. Accept that some people will be confused or uncomfortable. When you start closing the gap, showing more authentic self, people who knew only the surface version will notice the change. Some will be confused, some will be uncomfortable, some will prefer the easier version you used to show. That's information. That's data about who can handle the real you and who can't. And it's painful but necessary, because you need relationships with people who know and accept the real you, not relationships with people who only like the performance. Step 7. Forgive yourself for creating the gap. You weren't weak or fake or wrong to develop beneath skin. You were protecting yourself the only way you knew how, surviving in an environment that punished authenticity and rewarded suppression. The gap served you once. It kept you safe when showing your real self was genuinely dangerous. But you're not in that situation anymore, or at least not as much. and the protection that saved you is now the thing isolating you. You can start closing the gap, revealing the real you, showing what's beneath the skin. Slowly, carefully, selectively at first, but actually closing the gap instead of maintaining it forever. The first time you show someone your real self after years of hiding will feel like emotional nakedness, like vulnerability so extreme it's almost unbearable. Your nervous system will scream danger, will beg you to go back to surface level, will insist that hiding is safer than being seen. Feel the fear and show yourself anyway. Let one person see one real thing. And when they don't reject you, when they respond with understanding or curiosity or acceptance, you'll have evidence that the fear was wrong, that people can handle more of the real you than you thought, that the gap doesn't need to be this wide forever. Beneath skin consumes connection by making hiding feel safer than being known. But you've noticed the cost now. You've felt the loneliness of being surrounded by people who don't actually know who you are. You've recognized that the gap between authentic and presented has become so wide, it's isolating you from everyone, including yourself. And that awareness is the first step toward closing the gap, toward showing what's beneath the skin, toward being actually known instead of just recognized. You're not fake for creating the gap. You were surviving, protecting the real you from a world that felt unsafe for authenticity. But protection has become prison, and safety has become isolation. And the gap that kept you hidden has also kept you unknown, unseen, unloved for who you actually are beneath the performance. It won't be easy, closing a gap this wide after maintaining it this long. Some days you'll want to give up, go back to hiding because hiding is comfortable, familiar, safe. But it's not connection. And you deserve to be known. Not just the surface version, not just the public presentation, but the real person beneath the skin, the one with complicated thoughts and weird interests and intense feelings and authentic reactions. That person deserves to be seen, that person deserves to be known, that person is you. The void continues. If this reached beneath your skin and touched what's hidden there, share it with someone who might be living beneath their own skin too. Comment one small, authentic thing about yourself that nobody knows. Let's start closing the gap together. The next chapter is waiting. Until then, remember, hiding was survival, but being known is living. The person beneath your skin deserves to be seen.